Hello. Today we will continue talking about the US economy, and our topic for today is the brief story of this economy. The modern American economy traces its roots to the quest of European settlers for economic gain in the 16th and 17th and 19th centuries. The New World then progressed from a marginally successful colonial economy to a small independent farming economy, and eventually to a highly complex industrial economy. During these evolutions, the United States developed even more complex institutions to make it grow. And while government involvement in the economy has been consistent theme, the extent of that involvement generally has increased. North America's first inhabitants were Native Americans, indigenous people who are believed to be traveled to America about 20,000 years earlier across an land bridge from Asia, where the Bering Strait is today. They were mistakenly called Indians by European explorers who thought that they had reached India when first landing in the Americas. These native people were organized in tribes and, in some cases, confederation of tribes. While they traded among themselves, they had little contact with people of other continents, even with other native people in South America, before European settlers began arriving. When economic systems they did develop were destroyed by the Europeans who settled their lands. Vikings were the first Europeans to discover America, but the event, which occurred around the year 1000, was largely unnoticed, and at the time most of European society was still firmly based on agriculture and land ownership. Commerce had not yet assumed the importance that would provide an impetus to the further exploration and settlement of North America. In 1994, Christopher Columbus and Italian sailing under the Spanish flag set out to find a southwest passage to Asia and discovered a new world. For the next 100 years, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and French explorers sailed from Europe for the New World, looking for gold, riches, honor, and glory. But the North American wilderness offered early explorers a little glory and less gold, so most did not say. The people who eventually did settle North America arrived later, in 1607. A band of Englishmen built the first permanent settlement in what was to become the United States. The settlement Jamestown was located in the present-day state of Virginia. Early settlers had a variety of reasons for seeking a new homeland. The Pilgrims of Massachusetts were pious, self-disciplined English people who wanted to escape religious persecution. Other colonies, such as Virginia, were focused principally at business ventures. Often, though, pity and profits went hand in hand. England's success at colonizing what would become the United States was due in large part to its use of charter companies. Charter companies were groups of stockholders, usually merchants and wealthy landowners, who sought personal economic gain and perhaps wanted to also advance England's national goals. While the private sector financed the companies, the king provided each project with a charter or grant, conferring economic rights as well as political and judicial authority. The colonies generally did not show quick profits, however, and English investors have turned over their colonial charters to the settlers. The political implications, although not realized at the time, were enormous. The colonists were left to build in their own lives, their own communities, and their own economy. In fact, to start contracting and rudiments of a new nation. What early colonial prosperity there was resulted from trapping and trading in furs. In addition, fishing was a primary source of wealth in Massachusetts, but throughout the colonies, people believed primarily on small farms and were self-sufficient. In the few small cities and among the larger plantations of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, some necessities and virtually all luxuries were imported in return for tobacco, rice, and indigo exports. Supportive industries developed as the colonies grew. A variety of specialized sawn mills and grist mills appeared. Colonists established shipyards to build fishing fleets and, in time, trading vessels. There also built small iron forges. By the 18th century, regional patterns of development had become clear. The New England colonies relied on shipbuilding and selling to generate wealth, plantations, many using slave labor. In Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas grew tobacco, rice, and indigo, and the middle colonies of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware shipped general crops and furs. Except for slaves, standards of living were generally high, higher in fact than in England itself. Because English investors had withdrawn, the field was open to entrepreneurs among the colonists. By 1770, the North American colonies were ready both economically and politically to become part of emerging self-government movement that had dominated English politics since the time of James II. Despite development with England over taxation and other matters, Americans hoped for a modification of English taxes and regulations that would satisfy their demand for more self-government. Few though the mounting quarrel with the English government would lead to all-out war against the British and to independence for the colonies. Like the English political turmoil of the 17th and 18th centuries, the American Revolution was both political and economic, bolstered by emerging middle class with rallying cry of unreliable rights to life, liberty, and property, a phrase openly borrowed from English philosopher John Locke's second treatise on civil government. The war was triggered by an event in April 1775. British soldiers intending to capture a colonial arms depot at Concord, Massachusetts, clashed with colonial militiamen. Someone knows who exactly fired a shot, and 8 years of fighting began. While political separation from England may not have been a majority of colonists' original goal, independence and the creation of a new nation, the United States, was the unlimited result. The U.S. Constitution adopted in 1787 and its effect to this day was in many ways a work of creative genius. As economic charter it established that the entire nation, stretching then from Maine to Georgia, from the Atlantic Ocean to Mississippi Valley, was an unfilled or common market. There were to be no traffics or taxes on interstate commerce. The Constitution provided that the federal government could regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states, establishing uniform bankruptcy laws, create money, and regulate its value. Fixed standards of weights and measures, establish post offices and roads, and fixed rules governing patterns and copyrights. The last mentioned cause was an early recognition of the importance of intellectual property, a matter that would assume great importance in trade negotiations in the late 20th century. Alexander Hamilton, one of the nation's founding fathers and its first Secretary of the Treasury, advocated an economic development strategy in which the federal government would nurture and fund industries by providing over substitutes and imposing protective tariffs on imports. He also urged the federal government to create a national bank and to assume the public debts that the colonies had incurred during the Revolutionary War. The new government dallied over some of Hamilton's proposals, but ultimately it did make tariffs an essential part of American foreign policy, a position that lasted until almost the middle of the 20th century. So guys, that's enough for today. Goodbye.